Hello everybody, Bert here. Today we're going to be finishing up our block out. So I did cover in the last video, we covered some blocking out of the characters, and today we're going to be doing some more modeling so that we can achieve these results here. So as you can see, this part right here has some sort of extrusion that comes out, right? And we have that beveling here, sort of like some sort of bevel. And it looks like this part here is connected to that one. So we're going to try to achieve that. You might go on the more simplistic route, simply for the sake of time. But we're going to go ahead and look at these two here. I do want to note that I'm going to work on just one, so then I can duplicate it over. So let's go ahead and, I'm honestly just going to go ahead and delete that, because I don't need it for now. Let's go ahead and do a mesh smooth on this, right? So now, we get those smooth edges, and that's all I really wanted, but as you can tell, it is pretty high poly, if it were going to be for a game. So after I smooth it, I'm going to just try a whole mesh reduce, and this time I'll just do it, 10% reduction. So that might be a little better, but now we have some weird funky topology. What we can do is we can come into the quad draw and relax by holding down the shift button and just kind of relax some of the topology, so that way we have some cleaner results here. As you could see, you could relax this topology to have a nicer edge flow after you do the mesh reduction. Okay, let's go ahead. Now we can go ahead and do hit Q on our keyboard, and we're going to go into vertex mode. We're going to hit W on our keyboard, and we're going to grab this little square right here, and we're going to just like shift this over like that. Okay, we're going to grab this and just kind of shift that on over like that. Okay, now another thing we're going to do is we're going to do an extrusion. So we're going to go ahead and do Control E to extrude, and we're going to go ahead and pull this out like that. Now I want to keep in mind that there is some thickness to this, but where there isn't any thickness is the blade part, right? So now we're going to finalize this by going to object mode, and now we're going to go ahead and merge vertices that need to be merged. So select those two vertices, merge vertices to center. The way I did that is I selected the vertices, I shift right click, merge vertices to center. Now what I can do is, in this view, I could just do G to repeat. So I'm going to do that all the way around. Let's just make sure it's working. It is. I don't know why it wasn't working here. Maybe I missed it. Sometimes it's good to be in the side view, sometimes it's alright to jump around. Just make sure you're keeping an eye on things. There's never a right or wrong when you're working in all these 3D applications. I think the main thing to keep in mind is that you will encounter some issues if you do G to repeat all that often, and you don't keep an eye on it. Honestly, that's all I'm trying to say. Just keep an eye on it, especially in perspective mode. There we go. Let's just finish these off right there. Got a couple more. G to repeat. Alright. So as you can see, we got the sharpness of the blade now. That sharpness is exactly what we wanted. Look at that. Now, what's next, you may be asking? I suggest, since this is a modeling video, right? We're going to be doing modeling. Because the first one was a block out, so what we're going to be working on today is the actual modeling itself of this blade. I mean, what do you call it? Stinking battle axe. That's what it is. I don't even know what I'm modeling right now, geez. So yeah, for the sake of time, I'm going to go the simplistic route. I'm not going to go crazy with this at all. This is not a portfolio piece. This is just a tutorial on how to do weapons for a game art, for a game-ready asset, rather. So yeah, there's that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to put this in object mode. I know it sounds redundant because I just selected all those edges, but I'm going to isolate the selection and then go back into edge mode. When you go back into edge mode, it keeps the last edge selection, which is really good. I think that is a really good thing that Maya has set up. So now, since we have all of this selected, let's go ahead and do a bevel. So once we bevel, you want to keep in mind that there may be n-gons, may or may not be n-gons, right? But you want to just keep in mind that there may be n-gons, especially since you're dealing with all these shapy, curvy objects. especially when you come around here, but it actually did a really great job at directing the edge flow to go around, which is great. You know, I think that looks pretty decent for what we're at right now. And I still have isolate select on, so as you can see, everything goes away. And if you forgot where isolate select is, it's right here. So I'm going to click that off again, and now you can see my reference. Now you see that there's a bevel, but it seems that the bevel is a bit more drastic. So let's go ahead and bevel it again. I just did a Control Z, and now let's go ahead and let's try out segments. See, I don't want to add segments because like it just, you see how like it does no difference. Let's try fraction. So yeah, that does bevel it out a little better. I just thought that it was a little bit deeper of a bevel in the concept, so I wanted to just match it. So now that I did a deeper bevel, I may want to add one segment, not too many, but just one. Okay. See, now that gives you way better results there. In my opinion, I think that's the best way of doing it, is to just keep track of where your bevel is going and what it's doing. So like, I don't know. I'm really nitpicky about beveling because I want to make sure that there's no n-gons. And if you're not familiar with checking n-gons, we can go here to mesh cleanup, and we're gonna do let's go reset that tool. Select matching polygons, and then we're going to do faces with more than 4 sides, and then do a cleanup. And as you can see, there's no n-gons. Nothing appeared. Usually, if there were an n-gon, if I made an n-gon right here, it would pop up. So, next thing, topology that you don't need. This would be a prime example of topology that you don't need, because in here, these faces are missing. That should be missing, because there's none of these faces are going to be seen. So you see how I just clicked all those faces unknowingly? If you want to select this, hold shift, and then double click along a loop where you want it to, it actually just stops at this loop here. So I could do the same thing to this, here, shift, double click, and then click here, and then shift, double click. So as you can see, it selects that. Now I can go ahead and delete that. This is also a lot better for when you're UV cutting, because now, as you can see, you know, yeah, it does bleed through, but now we can just, let's actually get everything in object mode, go into the front view, because ultimate accuracy is the best. So now we're going to come here and shift double click on those edges, and we're going to straighten that out by holding down, clicking R rather, and then pushing these so that they're straight, and then we're going to hit W and then just scoot those in like that. You see? And since we are going the simplistic route, I'm not going to go ahead and do any of that. I think I'm just going to leave it as such and try to achieve some sort of ornate design using the quad draw tool. So now, let's go ahead and fix up some of the stuff going on here. So, like I said, beveling for the modeling. So now we're going to go ahead and do a bevel here. Let's go ahead and bevel. And, I mean, we could fool around with it, but actually, that's fine. Let's do this. G to repeat. I beveled it, and then segment. Okay. So now, I would suggest maybe beveling this here, and what I do want to do is reduce it. Reduce the fraction because it's a bit much, so we'll do it like that. But honestly, for the sake of games, you might not even need to bevel that there. Like, that's such an insignificant part that really, like, it wouldn't need a bevel. Now, I'm going to select this object, and I'm going to shift right click over the object, and I'm going to go to soften, harden edge. So as you can see, it gives me a nice, crisp, look at that, very crisp results. Look at this. See, I don't know, that edge still kind of bothers me. I might round it out, to be honest. Let's bevel that. Segments. Okay. So now I'm considering beveling this one too. I don't know what I did there. Alright. Segment. And notice how when I get to like the cylindrical stuff, there's no unnecessary edge loops. Like, I would even say maybe this one is unnecessary. Right? These are necessary because this is what makes its shape. I meant these, by the way, not the ones coming up and down. Let's see. Is this one necessary? I mean, not really. But we'll see. All right. So as you can see, I got these really great results just from, blocking things out. So here, like right here, right? Perfect example. Might have gotten a little carried away with the extruding here. So now let's go ahead and delete that. There you go. All right. So there is our modeled out, quote unquote, version of this. Now, I don't know if you guys remember from the last one, but we're going to go ahead and duplicate this over to the other side so that it's exact. Another thing, I feel like this needs some other stuff. Like, am I wrong here that there's like, oh no, you know what? We did a pretty good job here. Let's see, this here, this might want to be beveled here. Yeah, there we go. It's a lot. See how nice and round it is? I think here, you know what? I think it looks fine. Like, really, there's nothing that I can, like, a lot of this is just going to be in the texturing, right? So a lot of this is just for the texturing. These results here, a lot of that's texturing. Even this, like, all that can be done at texturing. Alright, so I feel like we're ready to go into UV cutting. Let's see how we're doing on time. So, I mean, let's go ahead and duplicate this first. So let's do history, freeze, transform, center, pivot. We talked about this in the first video if you missed the first video. So now we're going to do a Control D to duplicate, go over the channel box and do a -1 on the scale X. So now it does an inverse, a complete inverse of what I'm working on. Now I'm going to move this so that it's perfectly aligned there. And in order to get the ultimate accuracy, let's go ahead and do it in the front view. Boom, right there. Could it get any better? I mean, maybe it could if you were like some sort of professional, but no. Alright, now we are going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? Let's see. Let's go ahead and do a quad draw on this. So it's history, freeze, transforms. Now I'm going to select this object here, and this little button right here is what makes the object live, meaning it makes it a surface where you can draw polygonal objects on it. Like, you can actually go into the quad draw, and if I wanted to, for example, turn on symmetry on the X, I could go ahead and make some sort of ornate design, like maybe that one there. Wow, look at that. So now I could just come here and merge that with this, that with that, and let's get out of front view. I know it might be a little bit weird what's going on. If you don't know what's going on, I don't blame you. The reason is that I didn't use isolate select before making it live, so then this is in the way. But since the only thing that's live is this object, this is the only thing these quads are actually grounding themselves to. So yeah, that's maybe something we could do for the sake of time, right? Just like some simple design. Now, I want to maybe just kind of kill that off there. See that? Now I relax, I hold down the shift tool. There's that. So even this will give it some sort of like variation. I think that it's good to kind of like do what you can, even if you're not going to get it exact with the concept. I mean, this depends. I mean, if you're in a company, you definitely want to get it exact to the concept, but this is just a tutorial for people who want to follow along. So, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and use the quad draw tool to create that there. Okay, so it's a simple kind of like extruded part. Now, this is where it gets interesting, right? So we made this object live, and what you want to do, since it's live, is you want to get it out of live mode, but after that, you want to get rid of symmetry. So let's get that out of live. So now this is a selectable object. I can select that object. I'm going to go ahead and inverse my selecting by holding down shift and then dragging that out. And I'm going to go ahead and do a Control E to extrude. Now, when I Control E to extrude, you see, it's going to pop out like this. Okay, it's going to give me that. Now, I kind of want to shift this entire edge loop up so that this blade doesn't kind of stick out like that. So now I'm just going to shift that on up like this. See? And for the sake of being weird, I don't know. I feel like it's weird. I need to move these back like this, just because like I want it to be aligned with this section here. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do a good old a mesh smooth, right? So this will give it a nice smooth effect. But notice how like clunky and gross it is. That's because we didn't add any support loops. So now once we add support loops, if I come into my multi-cut and I hold down the control button, I can go ahead and put edge loop, support loop there, a support loop there, and a support loop there. Essentially what it does is once you smooth it, it gives you really nice results because it keeps the shape of the mesh a lot nicer. And it's a lot cleaner too. And notice it's still a pretty low poly object. It's not like crazy high poly. There's nothing really abstract or out of the ordinary here. The one thing that is, you know, high poly about it is that it has an interior. So notice when you're working in games, right? The first thing they talk about is get rid of faces you don't need. So don't need that. Don't need that. You see? Like if that's going to be scooted into the mesh, like why would I, right? Let's see. So now remember what we were talking about when we hold down shift. So this is a great example. So if I do this, it works perfect, right? If I do this, it works perfect. But if I do this, oh, it also works perfect. I think I actually got ahead of myself. This was pretty easy to get rid of. So now, let's go ahead and look at it without the geometry in the inside. Now, there are a few discrepancies. For example, when you look at it at an angle, you can kind of see the inside there. When you look at it from the bottom, seems pretty good. But when you look at it from the top, especially at the top, you can kind of see there. One thing you can do is just select all those edges, hit R on your keyboard, and just scale that in, right? So do the same thing here. Hit R, scale that in, right? Now that doesn't look weird. Nothing there looks weird. Nothing looks weird there. So now what we're doing here is we're adding some eye candy. Essentially, we're just adding this thing to kind of simulate like this is like something that's kind of holding this, sort of. I mean, how do I explain it? Like, I don't even know how to explain it. But all right, let's go. My mindset behind this is honestly just like adding something in replace to this. And you know, whoever made the concept, maybe he's butthurt or she is butthurt that I didn't do it exactly, but you know, it's a tutorial video. I'm not using this for a game or for my portfolio or anything personal, so this is just for fun. So now we got this, we got this, and we got this, and we got this, right? We got many objects here that we're dealing with. And now I think a good time to UV cut would be, now would be a good time to UV cut, actually, is what I'm saying. Is now we can go into the whole UV cutting aspect of modeling. So when you model, there's a lot of things you got to keep in mind. It's the UVs, right? The main thing is the UVs. The UVs are interesting because technically it's just this empty blank slate here. I'm just gonna dock this in, and so you guys can visualize it, right? That's my UV space. This is where the texture map will be laying on. So if I select this, look how, you know, gross and disgusting it is, right? As soon as I come up here, excuse my funny background. As soon as I select this object, what I want to do is actually, I'm gonna get rid of this. I'll tell you why in a second. I'm going to select this object and I'm going to go ahead and do a UV planar. Notice what it did. It basically laid out this entire mesh onto my UV space because I did a planar projection on the entire model along the Z-axis, right? So if I come here and I do a planar along the Y-axis, look at that. It does a projection along the Y. So this is what you see here. That is absolutely not what we want. We want it to be like this here. The reason is very simple. You want to make sure that there is a projection. Each one of these faces have a normal. This is a normal here. There is a normal pointing out into the Z-axis, right? this face has a normal, and that normal is pointing the x-axis. So if I want to go ahead and do a projection on everything, I still need to cut it and unfold it after I do my projection. So the first things first, you want to make sure you do a projection, right? And for those who hate Maya's UV cutting, like if you want to go to Blender and like UV cut it in Blender, like all power to you. You can go ahead and do that and follow along in the next video after this UV cutting lesson. But for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and UV cut this, and you guys can just follow along to the best that you can. So now, let's take a look at this here. So this edge is this edge right here doesn't have any follow through. For example, there's no middle edge that I can like cut and like make it so it's organized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an edge loop that goes all the way down the middle along this mesh and then meets this edge here. So it's going to go here, 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 and then this I'm going to connect with that edge loop that I add. So with the multi-cut, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit control, and like I said, we're going to add an edge loop there, right? And now, oops, why did that not, oh, that's right. I got rid of the, remember the geometry we got rid of? So that's where my edge loop stopped. So now I got to go ahead and do multi-cut tool again, control, and then just add one there. As soon as I added that, it gave me this result here. It stops my edge flow. In order for me to keep it going, I could just connect these two here, just by clicking. And it's a sticky tool, so keep in mind. So if you want to just hover until you see that red dot, click. Don't do anything besides just, find another red dot to connect it to. So there you go. Now you want to hit enter, and then it finalizes that multi-cut. Okay, I just got rid of my UV because it's getting in the way. I want to do the same exact thing that I did down up there, but down here now. So I'm going to go ahead and do multi-cut. Connect those there. Alright. So now, I'm going to go ahead, and now I have a perfect loop, check this out, all the way around. Notice, I have a perfect loop all the way around. And if all goes well, this will cut nice in half. Right in half. So now we're going to go to UV, cut UV edges. I actually did the control shift thing where I dock it here, so I'm just going to go ahead and use my shortcut. But for those who don't have it. Now, if I come here into my UV editor and I do a UV shell projection, selection. So I have in my UV shells, I select both UV shells, and I go to where it says unfold, unfold. Now look at the results that I have here. I have this half perfectly cut with that half, and this couldn't get any better. Like, really, I'm not even kidding. I've been doing this now, like I've been UV cutting for a while now. Like, this really couldn't get any better. So now I'm going to go ahead and select this, and I have this magic function that my professor at my school gave me. It's quite beautiful and gorgeous, and I love it. Maybe you can't see it all that well, but it's this button right here. Essentially, if you look at the code that's right here, I don't know, I just tried to point at my screen. It's kind of embarrassing. But here, if you look at all the code that's there, it's essentially orienting the shells, doing a layout, a unfold, and it's also doing a projection based off of the normals of all these faces, right? So instead of confusing you, I'm going to just toss you a link so you could just bring it into your custom shelf and use that. If you don't have it, which I'm going to pretend like I don't have it, I'm going to just go ahead and scale these in manually and just kind of move it over. So that's one area in which I'm taking up UV space, okay? But since I do have the code, and I'm just going to use it, okay? So I'm going to select the shell, select this, and then click this magic button. Now, what it's doing is Maya, well, the guy who coded it, is basically finding the perfect position for these shells to be positioned so that the checkers are all like matched nicely. So I'm going to select this, and then actually I'm going to optimize my view so I can click these checkers. So like I said, that code isn't always the best for intricate objects like this. I'll show you what it's good for later. But let's go ahead and load up the UV editor again, get rid of those checkers, and let's just Control Z until we get back to this. Now look at the difference between doing it manually and with the checkers. So you may want to do it manually. Like I said, with all power comes great responsibility, and whoever made this thing keep in mind that they made it for simpler objects, not for complex objects like this. Okay, so now let's get rid of those checkers. And now you may be asking, okay, why did you delete the other one? So now I'm going to go ahead and do a Control D to duplicate. I'm going to come here to my channel box and I'm going to do a scale -1, and I'm going to move it into place again. Alright? Now, if I select both of these and I mesh combine them, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a delete history, freeze transform, center pivot. I'm actually also going to save because I haven't saved in a while and I don't want to cry. So now, check this out. Both of these objects are selected. If I look at my UV editor, you better believe that there is another shell on top of this one. I just haven't done anything with it. I can come here, not drag select, but just clicking on it and move it. And look at that. It's already UV cut. Why on earth would I UV cut things twice when I don't have to? You see? So now I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder. Wherever that is. There it is. Hi. It's back. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do a layer, create layer from selected, and call this blade. Okay? Hide that. That's all UV cut. So now we're going to just call this UV'd. Alright? What's next? Let's do this one. Why not? We're going to isolate the selection. We're going to select this, do the history, freeze transform, center pivot. And we're going to do a projection. Not along the Y, right? You want to do a UV projection, planar, but you want to do the projection along the Z. Okay? Now that makes it, so Maya gives it cuts by default. Anything that has open holes in it, like this will be a cut. This is a cut. This is a cut. But that's just Maya doing it by default. I want to make my own cuts now. So I'm going to make a cut here. And I'm going to make a cut here. See? So now, I'm going to go ahead and do cut UV edges. With my UV editor open, if I just select both shells, I can hit Control U, which is unfold, and then I'm going to use that magic button. Just for the sake of time. You can go ahead and align it yourself and put it however you want. It really doesn't matter. So now, that's all set. Okay? This is already UV cut and ready to go. So we're going to go ahead and do another layer. We're going to call it Ornate Design UV'd. And we're going to hide it. And that's how I UV cut. That's my process for UV cutting. I just hide things as I go. So now, we were talking about projections. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is you could project. Oh my gosh, look at those cuts. That is gross. So one thing you want to keep in mind, just so I get rid of those cuts, I'm just going to do any projection. I don't care what it is, just to get rid of that. When you're doing a projection, you also have the option of doing a cylindrical projection. So in this case, it would be really helpful to do a cylindrical projection because now I can, okay, for example, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if I go here and I select faces that I want to select, for example, let's do from here, up here, to like, from here to like down here. Something like that, right? You know what? I'll just deselect these. So shift select these down there. Yeah. So from there to there. Let's just say best case scenario, we do that. Okay? I can select faces and project them by doing a cylindrical projection on those faces. Okay? So now with that cylindrical projection, it gave me a perfect cut according to the normals of those faces. I know it sounds confusing, but there's no other way that I could possibly explain it besides showing you exactly what it does. So now, as you can see, check this out. That's what I got out of it with the cylindrical projection. Okay? Now, we're not done yet. We're going to select this. We're going to Control U. Does that look familiar? See how it kind of has that shape? It's like a little flashlight almost. Now, with shell projection, I have shell projection on, and shell mode. So shell mode makes it so I can select shells now. So instead of having me coming here and like in object mode, selecting each face and doing all that good stuff, no, just shell mode, select, and then now I'm gonna do a projection along the Y. So UV planar option box Y project. Now look at that. Isn't that perfect? Look, Control U. I just unfolded that. That's like almost perfect. That's literally perfect. I cannot get any better than that. And I guess this is me patting myself in the back because I really was not the greatest at UV cutting, like, you know, a good 7 months ago. But after the summer, while I was doing my internships over the summer, it just shot out like how much I was actually getting done and how much UV cutting I was needing to do. So now we can do things manually too, right? So like it doesn't have to be a projection. I could select this edge and then come here. Oops, we're getting lost here. Let me hit F. Okay, I hit F so that I could center where I'm at. All right. So I'm going to select this edge, and now what I can do is shift double click all the way down here like that, right? And then just do a cut. So you want to make sure your cut is following this cut, right? You wouldn't want to cut like here and then a cut here, right? You want to make sure that this cut is kind of following the other cuts, right? This doesn't even have a cut. This shell right here, I projected it along its normals facing up, so then it doesn't have any cuts. It's just laid out flat on the UV editor. Here you need to make cuts because this is what's going to be unfolding. So if I come back and I select this and I go to my unfold button, look at this. Now if I just drag all those UV shells with that magic button that I gave you guys, let's take a look. Look at that. I just UV cut that. Alright? So don't give me no, oh, UV cutting's hard, like I can't figure it out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's very difficult. I'm making it look easy, honestly, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of patience. It takes time to get your mindset working in UV cuts, but you know, it's life. You know, nothing comes easy in life. I think a lot of the times people who are 3D artists, they get it twisted. You know, they're like, oh, I want to be good like tomorrow. Like, no, I made this. This would have taken me so long. Like, if this was like 7 months ago, this would have taken me so long. But now I'm at a point where I'm comfortable enough that I can make videos for you guys and show you guys my workflow, because this is essentially like the workflow that you need for game assets. If this were, like, let's say this was in the hands of a character and he's the main character, or there can be she characters. Let's say this was for Tomb Raider and she's holding this battle axe. You know, it has to have a lot of detail, but they use the polygons that they need, not more than that. Right, so this doesn't have any topology in the inside. This has topology only where I need it. Right, so that's just, you know, the game ready workflow. If this was for like Pixar, I mean, I don't know if they even care about polygon, but yeah, Pixar, we're not doing Pixar stuff. We're doing game ready assets for these videos. So now I don't even know how I'm doing on time, to be honest, but I'm pretty much done here. So this is all set. Like, I have this all UV cut and ready to go, right? So for the sake of, I'm just gonna actually put this here so you guys can see, guys, gals, whoever's watching. Okay, so check this out. I don't want to dock it or anything. I just want to move it to the side. There we go. Now that is stacked, so whatever texture I apply to this will be applied to this because it's stacked perfectly to the vertice. It's perfectly aligned. I cannot get any better than that. Now I'm going to select this one, and that's taking up most of my UV space. So now if I shift click on these objects, I can now go to shell mode, select the blades, right? Even though I selected this, now I can shift deselect and then move the blades over like that. Okay, you don't want any stacking going on if they're not objects that are going to need the same textures. Now, get out of that. Now everything that's positioned, UV cut, and modeled and ready to go can be mesh combined at this point. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard, and then I'm going to select this. These are UV cut, modeled, and ready to go. So now what do? Mesh combine. Right? So now what's next? This one. Okay? So this right here is insignificant. It's small, right? So we gotta scale according to the size of its actual model, right? Because why would this take up this much space if it's really like a tiny thing? So let's scale it so it's like maybe like there, and then we'll put it in the corner for now, like right there, right? So now if I select this and then I shift select that, now I can take a look at where those things are and position them so that they're perfect, right? So this one will be perfectly aligned there. This one will be perfectly aligned here. You know, I would even argue take up more UV space. This could definitely be bigger because it's going to take up a lot of space. Like, I mean, a lot of texturing. Like, most of our texturing is going to be on those blades, right? It's like our focal point. So now I can go ahead and grab this and scale it down even more. Maybe even position this little part here and then grab this guy and then bring it up there. This is in the way, right? So now what we could do is scale this down, move it here, grab these here, and then move that over. Oops, remember, if you just click and move, it thinks that it's only trying to grab that shell, so you might want to drag select and then move that on over. Okay, so now look, none of my UVs are touching. This isn't touching. This isn't touching anything. But one thing you want to keep in mind, and this is a very serious thing, before you bring this into Substance Painter, which is the next video, right? I'm going to cover rendering and texturing. You want to keep in mind that this is one island, right? If I go ahead and move this up, look at what happens. It's another island. If I move this over, that's another island. You want to make sure everything is just nicely packed and tight within this ratio right here, from 1 to 1. That's it. That's all that Substance Painter is going to read. If you have UDIM or whatever and you do that kind of stuff, good for you, all power to you. This is the only thing that Substance Painter will be reading within this texture space. Okay? Now it's ready to go. This is all set to go to Substance Painter for texturing. Alright? And again, guys, I want to just remind you, keep your UVs nice and tight. Do your modeling nice and clean, no n-gons. Use the geometry that you need, not more than you need. And we're all set and ready to go. On the next video, I will be covering how to do texturing in Substance Painter. But first things first, before I finish this video, let's talk about mesh combining everything, deleting the history. Take a look at this while I delete the history. Watch. History gone. Look at this right here. Freeze transforms. Actually, that doesn't really do much. And then center pivot. Now, if I go here and I go to soften harden edge, now it is 100% finished and ready to go. Okay? So now I'm going to select this object. I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, and I'm going to go ahead and put this into my data folder, because that's where the FBXs and OBJs go according to industry standards. That's what my professor told me, I guess. But I usually just put it on the desktop because I'm lazy. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and call this Battle Axe. And we're going to call it Tutorial. And we're going to call it Game Ready. So that will be the FBX that I will be using for the next video. I hope everybody has a great holiday. Or if it's not a holiday and you're watching this on a random day, I hope you have a nice random day. My name is Bert. You can go ahead and subscribe, follow, do whatever you got to do. Have a nice one. Bye.